This is Audible.
Simon Maverick presents Theo of Golden, a novel by Alan Levi. Read by David Morse, with a dedication and afterword read by the author.
To Cubby Culbertson, as a token of gratitude for our long friendship, and a reminder, just between us, that you promised to buy 100 copies of the book if I dedicated it to you. Will that be cash or charge?
From a brochure announcing an art exhibit at Zila Gallery. Ellen's Wilted Halo, Christmas Shoes of Lamisha W., Pill Bottle of Babo, Found Feather of the Absent Jay, October Sky above the Oxbow, Oceanscape at Biscopo. The blues of Golden were plentiful that year. Prologue. Theo was in Golden for only a year, from springtime to springtime. He arrived just before Easter, when the Bowery and the Promenade were an ocean of dogwood blooms and azaleas, when pollen settled like a lemon patina on every exposed surface in the city. Over time, his friends would learn that he had a great fondness for rivers, be it the Douro of his childhood, the Seine of his glory days, the Hudson of his retirement, or the half-dozen others that flowed through his various hometowns. He had a riparian instinct that seemed to draw him toward moving water. Growing up in a maritime nation might have had something to do with it. Perhaps every son of Portugal has a sojourning spirit of Magellan in his blood. Whatever the reason, it is not surprising that he chose to live beside the Oxbow when he was in Golden. From his back window facing west, he could see it at any hour of the day. From just outside his back door, 3 stories up, he could hear it. Or so he said. At every place or any hour, with his eyes closed, he could feel it, could sense its determined pursuit of the Gulf, its winding journey south, its glad march to the Atlantic. Only a year, not so long, but long enough to create a current of his own and to catch others in it. Without knowing it, a whole cadre, Asher, Tony, Ellen, Basil, dozens of others, was being carried along by the vortex that was Theo, floating, sailing, gathering mass and momentum, running to an ocean they knew little about at the time. And looking back, all would have said, in praise of that old Portuguese man with the lilt in his voice and the hint of a smile constantly on his lips, our hearts, to use the preacher's words, our hearts burned within us. Chapter 1. On his first full day in Golden, Theo woke early, pulled back the curtains of his hotel room, and looked out over the southern dawn. He had arrived the previous afternoon from his home in New York City, where winter, with a newsworthy late-season mixture of snow and ice, was in full fury. The flight to Atlanta on a private jet, and the drive farther south to Golden, in a chauffeur-driven Lincoln town car, had transported him to a world of warmth, abloom in myriad shades of green, yellow, lavender, and pink. Now, waking from a night of restful sleep, he stood inches from the window and breathed deeply, as if he might somehow inhale the freshness of morning through the panes of glass. He gazed admiringly at the first touches of springtime. His eyes moved westward to the broad, meandering flow of the Oxbow River. A ribbon of fog hovered over the water. From 3 stories up, and through the dim light before sunrise, Theo recognized many of the landmarks he had studied in preparation for his trip. The cobblestone streets, the ironworks, the old cotton warehouses, the antebellum oaks. But 3 stories up was not nearly close enough for someone with his inquisitive disposition. He dressed comfortably, inspected himself in the mirror, straightened his collar and scarf, and turned off the lights. He hung a Do Not Disturb sign on the door handle and took the stairs to the hotel lobby. He tipped his hat to the desk clerk and stepped out into the cool morning, eager to walk the streets before they became busy with foot traffic and automobiles. Other than a coffee shop and a small diner, the businesses along Broadway were closed. Theo had the sidewalk almost entirely to himself as he began his walk. He had no particular destination or goal in mind. Whenever he saw an object or sight that interested him, and he was a man very easily interested, he paused and lingered until his curiosity was satisfied. He was, for instance, interested in the ornamental ironwork on the facade of the corner building. Who made it? When? How? He was interested in the composition of the bricks in the old but well-preserved building that now housed a college admissions office. He was interested in the plaque that told the story of the median, called the Promenade, that ran down the middle of Broadway. Wherever he lived or traveled, Theo made a habit of reading historic markers, something he was able to do proficiently in 5 languages. He was interested in a sculpture of modern vintage near the entrance of the university nursing school. He took particular interest in a small bird that perched and begged for crumbs from a bench along the sidewalk. Theo stopped, bent slightly at the waist, with his hands clasped behind him, and whispered to the imploring creature, "I am sorry, dear fellow, but I have nothing to give you this morning. Perhaps tomorrow? And stop complaining. Be glad you're not in New York today." He picked up an empty beer bottle and put it in a nearby trash can. At one point, he took out a small magnifying glass, a loupe, from his pocket to study a purplish azalea bloom. And on and on. Those punctuations of interest turned Theo's walk into a crawl. By the time he had gone a mere 2 blocks, morning traffic was steady. The sidewalks were beginning to buzz with students and business people, and the parking spaces on both sides of the promenade, which had been vacant earlier, were almost full. But not to worry. On this day, and for the foreseeable future, Theo had no deadlines, no meetings, and no obligations. He was at liberty to enjoy the carefreeness of unfettered flexibility and complete anonymity. He was a mere tourist. He did not know a soul in the town. Well, perhaps one. He was not yet certain how long he would be there, weeks, months longer. But in very short order, he was pleased with the feel of his new temporary home. First impression, a very pleasant place to be, and appropriately named. Golden. Chapter 2. As Theo concluded his stroll along Broadway, he returned to the small coffee shop he had passed earlier that morning. The aroma of caffeine hung like a scented cloud and functioned as highly effective advertising at the entrance to the business. A painted window pane next to the door identified the establishment in gold letters outlined in black. The Chalice, Light Street and Broadway, Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Once inside, Theo took a deep breath and scanned the room. Standing, sitting, alone, and in small clusters of various generations, ethnicity, and attire, people of all sorts had gathered in witness to the shop's magnetic pull. A young man, leaving the building with a cello on his back and a coffee in hand, skillfully navigated the tables and the incoming customers with occasional whispers of, "Excuse me." He caught Theo's eye with a sideways glance, smiled, nodded, and spoke a greeting. Such a thing was unusual, even suspect, in the big cities where Theo had spent most of his life, But he reciprocated the gesture with a nod and a smile, then stepped toward the short line where orders were placed. He sensed that he might become a regular there, an intuition that proved true for the year he lived in Golden. If only the coffee is as rich as the ambience, he thought. That wishful possibility seemed unlikely. Theo was used to the strong coffee of Europe, Abbonado and Café Pingado in Lisbon, Café con leche in Madrid, Espresso in Bologna, Café Noisette in Marseille. The American shops had often disappointed him, even in New York, where for every excellent cup he'd consumed, he had endured a half-dozen letdowns. His standards, he had been told, were rather exacting. The old man exchanged a greeting with the barista at the counter, placed his order, received his drink, and took a seat in a nearby armchair. He was more than a little surprised at the quality of the espresso, and nodded approvingly as the first sip rested on his tongue. He studied the room, the customers' faces, their voices, greetings and gestures, the care with which the cheerful barista did his work, the activity from table to table. But in short order, his attention was drawn to and fixed entirely on the artwork that covered the walls of the shop. On the left, right, and rear walls were portraits, 92 of them in total, done in pencil on white paper and in black frames of 3 sizes. All had obviously been done by the same artist, and, as if to reflect the customers in the shop at that moment, the collection included a full range of humanity, age, race, and expression. Portraits and more portraits. Even from the distance between himself and those framed faces, Theo perceived the richness of detail and delicacy with which they had been rendered. There was a quality to them, an aliveness, that would almost make one believe the people portrayed were spectators of the chalice rather than mere adornments on the walls. The old man's mind began to spin a fanciful vision. Each of the 92 frames is a window. Each face depicted in the frames is standing outside the building, peeking in with amusement at the customers on the inside. At night, when the shop is closed, the faces in the portraits leave their frames, step inside the shop, mingle, talk about who and what they've seen or overheard that day, share stories, and then return home by opening. He smiled at the colorful, if ludicrous, idea. Such things crossed his mind frequently. He had the imagination of a poet. But he had, too, the eyes and mind of a connoisseur. Though he was easily interested in many things, he was keenly interested in a particular few. Portraiture fell into that category. And so, while he wanted very much to study each of the 92 drawings closely and slowly, he decided to wait for a more opportune time, when the shop was less crowded. For now, he drank his espresso in small, deliberate sips. To do otherwise, in his mind, would have been disrespectful, even irreverent to the barista's art. When he finished his drink, he took up his hat, sauntered out of the shop with glances to the left and right, and returned to the hotel. Later that afternoon, following lunch and a nap, Theo walked to the river, strolled a section of paved pathway south to north, sat for a quarter hour with his face sunward, and then made his way back to the coffee shop. Aside from a few tables occupied by students, the place was empty. There was no line at the counter when Theo stepped up to place his order. "Welcome back," the barista said. "Twice in one day." Theo was impressed that the man remembered him, especially given the number of customers who had been in the shop at rush hour earlier in the day. "My dear fellow, you made a superb espresso this morning. Well done, and thank you. Perfectly je ne sais quoi. I have returned for the encore." The younger man chuckled. He didn't often hear French in the chalice. "Well, thank you, sir. I will aim to make this one even better. If it's not just right, please let me know. My name is Shep, and you are—" Shep reached a hand across the counter. The old man grasped it in both of his. "My friends call me Theo. It is very nice to meet you." Shep noted the precise enunciation and foreign accent in the old man's speech. "And you as well. What brings you to Golden?" "I'm here on business, but right now I'm very interested in the portraits." Theo gestured toward the walls. "I noticed them this morning, and I'm back to look at them more closely. Can you tell me about them?" By then, a group of 4 women had entered the shop and formed a line behind Theo. "I'll be glad to, Mr. Theo, as soon as I get a break, but here's something that will get you started. It might answer some of your questions. And I want you to tell me about you when we get a minute." Shep handed Theo a local magazine, The Gold Standard. On the cover was a picture of the coffee shop, taken at the entrance through a fisheye lens that caught all 3 walls, left, right, rear, and most of the portraits. In the center of the picture stood Shep and another lean, slightly gray-headed man, dressed in jeans, a T-shirt, and a tweed jacket. The caption read, "The Art of the Chalice." Theo opened the magazine, turned to the article, and began reading. It began as a lark, a what if, a would you, a maybe, coffee shop as art gallery. But that is what the Chalice, one of the city's most popular downtown businesses, has become in recent months. Located at the corner of Light Street and Broadway, the Chalice is owned and operated by Shep and Addie Carlisle, both natives of Golden. They bought the unoccupied 3-story building during the early days of the downtown Renaissance and, for almost a year, spent weekends and free time renovating the ground floor. When the building was finally completed, they left their bank jobs, apprenticed at an upscale coffee shop in Atlanta for 2 months to learn the art of coffee, and eventually opened their doors to strong sales and 5-star reviews. The Chalice offers a limited premier assortment of drinks and light pastries. Since the shop's opening, a loyal clientele has led to a thriving business. Its location, within 2 blocks of performance venues, restaurants, retail businesses, the courthouse, and Golden University's School of Art and Design, provides the Chalice with a steady stream of customers. Go any day at any hour, and you'll see a variety of faces among the patrons. Some of those faces never leave the room. The Chalice is a few streets away from the home and studio of Asher Glisson, also a native of Golden and one of its most prominent artists. Over the course of his career, he has taught private lessons, served as curator of the Bredlow Center for the Arts, illustrated numerous ad pieces and periodicals, and become renowned as a master of portraiture. When the coffee shop opened, Glisson was one of the first customers in line. He claims to have spent a sizable portion of his retirement savings on coffee within months of the shop's opening. A year ago, the Carlisles invited Glisson to display some of his artwork in the shop. He took the idea and ran with it. Shep Carlisle explains. "Asher said he had something in mind, but didn't tell us what it was. About a month later, he showed up with 6 portraits of some of our regular customers. We were floored. It took off from there. People love it. Some folks come in just to look at the drawings. We're really proud to have them here." There are presently 92 portraits on display. All are for sale. When one sells, another piece takes its place. Glisson speaks of the coffee shop in glowing terms. "The Chalice has become an institution down here, a real melting pot. I've tried to capture that in the portraits. My mother, who was an artist, used to tell me that every face is a story. I think she was right. These drawings are a neighborhood in their own right. It's been a labor of love to bring them together. I'm thankful that Addie and Shep have given them a home." Glisson can often be seen at the Chalice and elsewhere downtown, camera in hand, photographing material for his work. If you're in the coffee shop, he might well ask you to look his way. If he does, don't be surprised if you become part of the Chalice Gallery. More customers entered the shop. While Shep prepared their drinks, Theo reread the article. then rose from his chair and walked to the rear of the room. A dozen portraits, 3 rows of 4, were hung in neat lines on the back wall. Each was a head and shoulders composition. Theo removed a pair of wire-rimmed eyeglasses from his pocket, looped them over his ears, clasped his hands behind his back, and began to study the drawings from a yard away. One moment his head was held down to look over the top of his eyeglasses. The next his head tilted back to look through the lenses perched at the end of his nose. An art historian at the Louvre could not have been more engaged with or enthralled by the masterpieces at that great museum than the old man was by the portraits in the chalice. He moved closer, a foot or so from the wall, and scrutinized each drawing down to the most intricate of pencil lines. He was oblivious to time and the goings-on in the shop around him. When Shep had filled all his drink orders, he spotted Theo across the room, but chose not to disturb him. He was pleased that the old fellow was so absorbed in the artwork, but was also curious at what might be behind such keen interest. Even as a boy, Theo had been fascinated by fine lines and intricacy. Much of his childhood was spent peering through a magnifying glass at feathers, leaves, and insects in the vineyards around his home. He was bedazzled by spiderwebs, dragonfly wings, and the undersides of mushrooms. He collected postage stamps and was spellbound when he had first seen Da Vinci's line drawings and sketches. As a young adult and later, it had been his habit to carry a loupe, a gift from a teacher, in his pocket in order to examine small objects and details not visible to the naked eye. For one like him, the portraiture in the chalice was an embarrassment of riches, a treasure trove, a visual feast. At every frame, Theo leaned forward and genuflected, a man transfixed. He moved to the front of the shop and resumed his perusal, once directly over the heads of customers sitting at a table abutting the wall. He begged their pardon, but did not alter his course. For him, each face revealed a mood and hinted at a story and begged a question. What is that fellow so worried about? Why is the young woman so bashful? How would I describe the expression on that child's face? And how, dear God, does the artist render each one so convincingly, over and over? As he studied the pieces, Theo became increasingly perplexed, troubled even, that so many of the portraits were still available for sale. He was baffled by their price tags. Only $125 for this? Only $200? They are worth far more than that. Why, he wondered, were 92 portraits of this quality, at these prices, still unsold? He lingered at the portrait of a young woman with delicate features, unsmiling, and with eyes that looked directly into his. They had a haunting familiarity about them. Could it be? From her, he moved his attention one frame to the right, to the face of a young man, looking away from the artist at something outside the frame. What was in those darting eyes? Fear? Suspicion? Contempt? Whatever it was, he seemed ill at ease in front of the camera. He wore a winter cap and a high collar that indicated cold weather. Theo had been studying the portraits for almost an hour when Shep finally joined him. They are something else, aren't they? Shep was wiping his fingers on a hand towel. He nodded to the portrait in front of Theo, the one of the young man with the nervous eyes. That fellow's been through some hard stuff. His little girl got hurt real bad in a car accident a while back. The mother was killed. He doesn't come here very often, but he usually just wants a regular coffee with room for cream. I don't think he even knows his picture is up here. Theo nodded and turned to Shep. Do you know all the people on the walls? I know most of them, at least a little bit. Some I know pretty well, some I don't know at all. The artist usually writes their names in small letters on the backs of the frames, so I can tell who they are if I need to know for some reason. But, Mr. Theo, before we talk about them, please tell me about you. What's your story? You said you were new to town. What brings you here? Where's home? Theo waved off the questions before giving a short answer. I have lived in a number of places. I was born and raised in the north of Portugal, but I have lived for many years in New York City. I still have a place there, but I am here on a bit of business, and my home today is Golden. Only one day, and already I am very fond of your city. And Mr. Shep, I particularly like your shop. The politely vague answer hardly constituted the story that Shep had hoped for, but he didn't press. A fuller version would perhaps unfold in time. Please, just call me Shep. That's what my friends call me, no mister. Of course. Thank you. And please call me Theo. Speaking of names, why the chalice? Now is Shep's time to be evasive. It had a nice ring to it. I'll tell you the longer story one of these days. Did you read the article about the portraits? Theo nodded. I did. Thank you. Very interesting. He handed the magazine back to Shep. Mr. Shep, excuse me, Shep, one thing I don't understand. Why do people not buy the portraits? Shep grimaced, then rocked his head left to right a couple of times and searched for a proper response. That's a mystery to me too, Theo. I know Asher's got plenty to do, and he probably doesn't need any more work, but I was hoping this might create some business for him. And so far it hasn't worked out that way. Not yet. We sold a good number at Christmas last year, but I'm still waiting for a big breakthrough. I have to believe that one of these days people are going to realize what a treasure these are. Asher did one of Addie, that's my wife, Adeline, and it's one of my most prized possessions. If my house ever catches fire, it'll be one of the first things I grab on the way out. Shep hesitated. We love having them here, but I wish someone would come along and buy all of them. Theo's eyes widened slightly. He moved his hand to his mouth, thumb under his chin and index finger tapping his lips. Shep looked toward the counter. A customer was waiting to place an order. Theo, I better get back to work. Thanks for coming in. You know, if you become a regular here, there's a good chance you'll end up on the wall someday. Welcome to Golden. Incidentally, how was the coffee? Superb. Excepcional. Maravilloso. Theo smiled, applauded softly, and patted Shep on the arm. He walked out of the shop, crossed the street to the median, and took a seat on a bench near the fountain. He thought of the unsold portraits, of the homes that would be beautified and the lives that would be enriched by their presence, of the artists who would be encouraged by their sale. It was there that the idea formed in his mind. Chapter 3. On his second full day in Golden, Theo took an early morning stroll through a residential area south of the hotel known as the Bowery. Gentrified was a word often used to describe the area. It was a neighborhood of vintage homes and tastefully pampered lawns that, like the rest of the city, awaited the full pastel explosion of springtime. The fuse of that explosion was burning shorter and shorter as new blossoms opened each day in abundance. From the Bowery, he walked and sat beside the river, as he'd done the day before. When he was confident the morning rush had subsided, he returned to the chalice. Theo, welcome back. 2 days, and you're already a regular. Good morning, Shep. Yes, indeed, a regular, but also a man under a spell. Shep wasn't sure if the spell was cast by the coffee or the portraits. Maybe both? Either way, he was pleased at the affable newcomer's presence. Theo remained at the chalice until lunchtime, inching his way once again around the walls of the shop. Shep watched the old man with growing curiosity. What could possibly be so interesting? Before leaving, and after considerable deliberation, Theo purchased a portrait of the young woman with the short hair, familiar eyes, and the unsmiling but not unfriendly face. He paid $125 cash. It felt more like a theft than a purchase. Why this one? Shep asked, as he wrapped the portrait in brown paper. "Do you know her?" Theo shook his head. "I don't know any of these faces. I would be happy to buy any of them or all of them, but this one intrigues me most at the moment." Shep's curiosity about the old man was only heightened by the purchase, and he could not imagine what Theo had in mind to do. Was he a collector, a critic, or a gallerist? Was he hoping to help the artist? When Theo returned to the hotel for his midday rest, he studied the portrait yet again. The woman's name, as Shep had told him, was printed in small letters on the back of the frame. Minette Prentice. "Yes, I believe you are the one," Theo whispered. He searched her name on a computer in the hotel's business suite and learned that she was a CPA in Golden with a reputable accounting firm. More importantly, for his purposes, he now had a mailing address for her. He began to compose a letter. Over the next couple of days, he worked on and off through multiple drafts until he was satisfied with his choice of words. "Dear Mrs. Prentice, we have never met, and I hope you will forgive me if it is inappropriate for a total stranger to approach you in this manner. I am an old man, 86 to be precise, and a newcomer to your town. I first saw you, actually a pencil drawing of you, when I was at the Chalice on the promenade a few days ago. As I studied your portrait, Mrs. Prentice, I had a strong sense that it belonged in your possession or in the possession of someone dear to you. After all, it only seems right that the finished work should go to the one who inspired it. And so I took the liberty of purchasing the piece with one purpose in mind. I would deem it an honor, and it would be a great kindness to me if you would accept the portrait as a gift to do with as you please. Might I make a proposal? And I do so beg your pardon if this is entirely out of line. Next week, on Thursday, at 7 o'clock in the evening, I will be sitting on a bench beside the fountain in a median nearest the Chalice. To make myself obvious, in case there are multiple exquisitely handsome 86-year-old men sitting there at the same time, I will be the one wearing a heather green flat cap. It should only take a moment to give you the portrait, though I will have plenty of time to visit should you be inclined and able to do so. Lest you find this all very odd and out of sorts, let me assure you I am a harmless old man, a widower, a father, a toothless lion with only innocent intentions. If, as has been said, it is more blessed to give than to receive, my happiness in putting the picture in your hands will be more than adequate recompense for my purchase. I look forward to meeting you. With kindest regards, Theo. Chapter 4. I got the strangest letter today. Minette Prentice was not inclined to use terms like strange unless something actually fit the description. She had long been a stickler for precision, both with words and numbers, even before she attained her license as a certified public accountant. What was so strange about it? Derek, her husband, was sitting at their kitchen counter, opening mail. He stopped what he was doing as he asked the question. In 5 years of marriage, he had learned her tones of voice and knew when she wanted his undivided attention. This was one of those moments. For one thing, I don't know who it's from. You know that pencil portrait of the Chalice, the one that Uncle Asher did? Apparently, somebody bought it, some old guy, and he wants to give it to me as a gift. He wants me to meet him next Thursday at the fountain. Is that strange or what? The look of mild interest on Derek's face became one of concerned curiosity, head slightly tilted, eyebrows raised. That's putting it mildly. Sounds dangerous to me. You don't have any idea who it is? You think it might be a joke? Maybe somebody we know? I don't have any idea who it is, but I don't think it's a joke. Here's the letter. Read it. Derek did so slowly, the wheels of his legal mind questioning and analyzing even as he pored over the words. Minette watched him as he read, looking for clues as to what he was thinking, knowing that his face would make a statement long before his mouth did. She could tell immediately he was intrigued. Beautiful penmanship, expensive paper, disarming language, no last name, no return address. Odd, but somehow credible. It's not what I expected, but it concerns me. Whoever he is, he knows who you are and where you live. But you don't know either of those things about him. Maybe Asher or Shep can tell us something about him. Or somebody else at the coffee shop. That's where the guy would have gotten the portrait, right? In the 6 years since Derek had graduated from law school, he'd worked as a prosecutor for the district attorney's office in Golden. He knew most members of local law enforcement. Perhaps someone at GPD would have some words of caution or counsel concerning the mysterious letter. Or maybe we could just show up next Thursday and see what happens. Minette said it with a finality that suggested she had already made up her mind. Before Derek could object, she continued, I've read the letter 4 times, start to finish, and I could be crazy or naive, but I think it's totally innocent. I think there really might be an old man who just wants to do something nice. What was that phrase you used the other day about the homeless woman on the back? Benign eccentricity? Maybe that's all it is. And what if you're wrong? Derek asked. What if he's a stalker or somebody mad at me for some case that I've handled? What if he's the brother of the gang member we sent away for life last month? Minette rolled her eyes. If it were any of those, I doubt they would have gone to all this trouble just to be a bother. And it looks like he wrote with a fountain pen, on linen paper no less. She paused. You know what I thought at first? Derek leaned forward on the counter, lacing his fingers together. What did you think at first? I thought it was you. Their eyes met. I thought maybe you'd bought the picture, like you said you were going to do a month ago. And I thought maybe you'd gotten someone to write in their very best handwriting on this $2 paper. And I halfway expected you'd be sitting at the fountain on Thursday. Am I right? Derek blushed and grinned. Oh, I wish you were. And I'm sorry I've been dragging my feet, but I promise I didn't write the letter. You don't really think you should meet the guy, do you? Only if you agree. But I'd like to. We don't have anything on the calendar for Thursday night. I say we show up, meet the mysterious stranger, and then go somewhere for supper and admire the girl in the picture frame. She laughed, then walked around the counter, stood behind Derek, wrapped her arms around his neck, and nuzzled his cheek. I don't feel very comfortable about this, he whispered. I totally understand, and I'm glad you love me enough to worry about it. But do this for me. Read the letter 3 more times with no distractions. If you don't think we should go after that, we won't go. The risk seems pretty minimal, if you ask me. It'll be in broad daylight, people everywhere. And if we don't like what we see at the fountain, we don't even have to go there, right? We can take binoculars and do surveillance from 100 yards away, and then decide what to do. Okay? This might be a story we tell our children someday. Now leave, and I'll fix something for supper. Chapter 5. Derek did as Minette requested. After washing the dishes and making a couple of phone calls, he took the curious letter to his office, a large closet with an old desk and chair where he sometimes retreated to study, pay bills, or answer emails. In the low light of a table lamp, he read the letter, his skepticism on high alert. And again, and once more. There was, Derek had to admit, an undeniable sincerity, an innocence, a timidity about it, even humor. Exquisitely handsome 86-year-old man. With each reading, his defenses softened, but he remained wary. It was disquieting that the writer had been so guarded about his identity that he had gone to considerable pains to identify, locate, and reach out to a very attractive young woman, and that he presented so many questions that cannot be answered. What a baffling epistle. Later that night, Derek and Minette lay in bed talking. "Okay, so what do you think?" she asked. "I did what you asked. I read it 3 times, and I'm still concerned." "How concerned?" "Not much, really. You gotta admit, it's pretty weird. Unless I have nightmares between now and Thursday or change my mind for some other reason, I guess I feel the same as you. This defies my consciousness, and, my God, this is my wife I'm talking about. But I think there really might be an old man who really does just want to give you a gift, though I can't imagine why. So we show up Thursday, stand at a safe distance from the fountain, and see what we see. If there's not a heather green flat cap at the fountain, or if we see the cap and it's on the head of a wild man, we call the police. Does that seem like the right approach? Have we lost our minds?" Minette snickered. "Counselor, are we actually thinking of doing something risky? The CPA and the lawyer, the 2 highly cautious, supremely rational type A's? Just think, we might actually meet a sincerely kind human being. There don't seem to be many of those around these days." Derek kissed Minette. "I get to sleep with one every night." He paused. "One more thing. I'm going to call your Uncle Asher tomorrow. Since he did the portrait, maybe he'll know something about the letter. It might even be part of this whole thing. I still think this might be a prank of some kind." Minette nodded her approval. "Well, that makes sense." She rolled toward him, a smile in her eyes. "You know, Mr. Prentice, this never would have happened if you'd bought the picture when you said you were going to." "Touché. Good night, Mrs. Prentice." "Night. Hey, by the way, what in the world is a flat cap?" "Google it. Night." In the studio of Asher Glisson, the portrait artist, the phone rang. He rarely allowed it in the studio when he was working, but he was expecting a call about a new commission. He looked at the screen and read the name. It was not the anticipated call, but he answered it anyway. "Well, good morning, Derek. How's my favorite nephew-in-law?" Derek chuckled. "Your only nephew-in-law is doing fine this morning, thank you. And how's my beautiful niece?" "Minette is fine. Why in the world is a busy lawyer like you calling a lowly artist like me at this hour of the day?" It was 10 o'clock. "Court's on recess. I just got out of a hearing on an awful case. You probably heard about it. Guy fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the center line, and killed a woman and really messed up a little girl. The driver's been charged with vehicular homicide. Isn't illegal. Everybody loses on this one. Anyway, I had a few minutes before the next hearing and wanted to run something by you. It involves one of the portraits you put up at the Chalice. You got a minute?" Derek read the letter to Asher. Asher responded slowly. "Wow, that is sort of strange. I see why you'd be worried. But Derek, to answer your question, I don't know anything about the man, and if this is a joke, I don't know anything about that either. Taking care of Minette comes first, but let me get this right. This guy, this Mr. Theo, wants to meet Minette on the promenade, in public, in broad daylight, so he can give her the portrait, right? And if you all would accept his invitation, you can see him from a long way off before you actually get to the fountain." It was the same conversation Derek and Minette had had the night before. Asher had often wondered how Derek could work criminal cases day in and day out without becoming totally jaded and distrustful of the entire human race. He understood Derek's apprehension, but he was also rather pleased that an old man had dreamt up such a generous scheme, if, in fact, that's what it was. "Derek, I know you and Minette will do the right thing. Let me know how it goes." He chuckled. "Heck, I might need to write the old guy a thank you note. People like me need people like him." "Thanks, Uncle Asher. I'll keep you posted. Back to the battlefield." Asher ended the call and resumed work at his drawing table. Beneath the skylight and the vaulted ceiling of his studio, he was himself a study in light and shadow as rays of morning sun dappled the room. For him, it was an ordinary day at work. He was wearing a loose flannel shirt, Payne's gray, the color of English rain, with sleeves rolled up to mid-forearm, tan cotton khaki pants with specks and smudges of color, and sock feet. His brown hair, finger-combed with artistic haphazardness, revealed touches of gray and fell over his ears and shirt collar. A day's worth of beard, maybe two, highlighted the contours of his face, his prominent jawline and cheekbones. A slight frown, his expression of attentiveness and concentration, was often present when he worked. His eyes were intent, purposeful, engaged, and yet, for all its seriousness, it was not an unwelcoming face. Children could hold his gaze easily, and older subjects had learned to interpret his studious look as a compliment. There was nothing wildly bohemian about his appearance, but there was enough to set him apart from his mid-50ish contemporaries who reported to banks or law offices or real estate agencies each morning for their daily bread. His wardrobe, unlike many of theirs, suggested a life free of supervision or a need to impress. Open windows welcomed bird song into the studio, the avian notes mixed with something orchestral playing in a small stereo nearby. Appalachian Spring? The song was appropriate to the time and place, the room full of simple gifts. Music was a pleasant companion to the isolation in which he often worked speechlessly for hours at a stretch. A photograph, placed on an easel an arm's length in front of him, was the subject of his work that morning. He sat as he drew. His right hand steadied a thin, rectangular lapboard. A pristine piece of 90-pound cotton paper, Stonehenge white, was affixed by thumbtacks at each corner. His weapons of choice, all crowded into his right hand as he drew with his left, were 2B and 2H pencils, a stick of charcoal, a well-worn tortillon, and a kneaded eraser. With those simple tools, that arsenal, he waged daily war against mediocrity and was rewarded with masterpiece after masterpiece. Slowly, as if rising through water, the shape of a head became apparent. Asher filled the outline, heavier lines first, followed by lighter ones and more delicate details, more lines, and the features, brow, lip, nostrils, crease, began to emerge. His hand twisted, turned, tapped, danced, hovered, and stroked the page in a choreography that had taken years to perfect. A man's face began to emerge from the lines, a man with big, untamed hair, a scruffy beard, a boyish grin, and a class clown playfulness in his eyes. It was a difficult energy to reproduce on a two-dimensional surface, but Asher wrestled it convincingly to the mat. He stood from time to time, stepped back, studied his progress, returned, and then resumed. By the end of the morning, the portrait was complete and ready for the frame, for the chalice. That night, when Derek got home, he told Minette about his conversation with Uncle Asher. It was decided. Next Thursday, they would be at the fountain. Chapter 6. By Thursday evening, Derek and Minette were a giddy mixture of adventure and mild apprehension. As their curiosity about the letter grew, their concern about the possibility of foul play all but vanished. Derek's one lingering concern, negligible at best, was about how they might be perceived in the eyes of their peers if they foolishly walked into a scam of some kind. They discussed one last time the option of going directly to the restaurant and skipping the fountain rendezvous altogether, but the intrigue had them in its grasp, and they agreed to carry on. This might just be something we'd tell our children about someday. At half an hour before the appointed time, they parked a couple of blocks from the fountain and then walked, holding hands, to their meeting with Theo. The sidewalk tables at the pubs and restaurants along Broadway were all occupied, and foot traffic was robust, made up predominantly of college students and other adherents to the idea that weekends begin on Thursday. The hour was a pleasant combination of cool air and sun-bathed pavement. The shadows of early evening were feather-soft, and joie de vivre prevailed up and down the promenade. Minette and Derek's eyes were laser-focused on the fountain from the moment it came into view, but passing cars, pedestrians, and the need to watch where they were going made it difficult to see who, if anyone, was sitting there. 4 benches were placed symmetrically around the fountain. The 2 that were most clearly visible were occupied by hatless sitters. The other 2 were difficult to see. But finally, at 50 yards or so, a heather-green flat cap shone like a beacon. Their stomachs jumped. "Derek, there he is," Minette whispered. She giggled in nervous disbelief. Her grip tightened around Derek's hand, and her body leaned into his. The old man was really there. And then a voice, a loud, unignorable voice. "Well, Derek, it's about time. Are you ready to buy a book? Please buy a book." The voice belonged to Tony, the bookseller. His shop, the Verbivore, was on the west side of Broadway, a stone's throw from the fountain. He rose from a wicker chair and snuffed out a cigarette underfoot. He hugged the couple, whom he knew well, and kissed Minette on the cheek for good measure. Usual greetings were exchanged while Derek and Minette looked repeatedly toward the median. They both hoped Tony might sense their preoccupation, but it was not to be. True to form, whenever he wanted someone's full attention, the bookseller kept a hand on Derek's shoulder. "Derek, no kidding, really. I had the book I was telling you about the other day, the one by Edward Albee, and if you don't buy it, I'll give it to you and then file for bankruptcy. Read it, and then let's discuss it. You can't say no. Come on. You can't be in that big of a hurry. It'll only take a minute. I put it on the stack in my office." Derek's protest fell on deaf ears. As Tony ushered him to the entrance of the bookshop, he looked dejectedly over his shoulder at Minette and mouthed, "I'll be right back. Sorry." Minette looked toward the fountain. She immediately resumed walking. The old man was sitting with the portrait across his lap, hands on his knees, watching passers-by. He appeared at ease and seemed happily entertained by the people around him. He said something to a little girl who was standing beside the fountain with her parents. Minette could not hear the words, but could tell they were friendly. If she could have read Theo's thoughts at that moment, she would have discerned an ambivalence that was not obvious in his demeanor. Earlier, as the old man had walked to the fountain, he had fidgeted nervously, checking his appearance repeatedly in the reflection of storefront windows, adjusting his hat, rehearsing possible first lines, and imagining how he might handle anger or apprehension if his well-intended mission did not go as planned. He almost hoped Mrs. Prentice might not show up, and he could put this whole silly idea to rest. But show up she did. When he first saw her, easily recognizable after spending so much time with a portrait, Theo's polite, deeply instilled inclination was to stand and step toward her. Instead, he remained seated until she was only a few steps away. He'd been saving the bench for their visit and did not wish to run the risk of losing it by leaving it unoccupied. The fountain was a popular place at that hour of the day. He rose, removed his hat as a gesture of respect, and stepped toward Minette. He was dressed fashionably, a handsome cashmere blazer, olive green trousers, and cream-colored linen shirt. Minette had half expected to meet a frail, bent, cane-bearing old man, a pale, sleepy-eyed relic. Instead, she was met by a spry, bright-eyed soul of medium height and portly build who stood solidly on his own 2 feet. He had a faint stoop to his shoulders, but otherwise no pronounced signs of age. Gray-white hair, receding but full, was combed back but not fussed over, giving him an aura worthy of the description, distinguished. He was clean-shaven. His skin, tan and healthy, hinted that he might be a man who had spent considerable time outdoors. Full eyebrows, nicely trimmed, tapered into smile lines that were etched into the corners of his eyes. He wore a subtle cologne, something only a woman would notice, and presented himself, in general, as a man well cared for but not obsessed with his appearance. He was obviously old, but a young old, in a way that would almost make a younger soul look forward to seniority. As Minette held out her hand to shake his, the thing that struck her most was the warmth of the old man's face, the gentle, immediate, half-timid smile, and the piercing, soft blue eyes that looked intently, even adoringly, into her face. And a sense, something she could feel even if she couldn't explain or define it, that he had anticipated and now took delight at being in her presence. "Yes, I believe you are the one," Theo thought. He removed his cap at her approach and bowed slightly as he took her hand. She had offered her right hand in the authoritative manner of a business meeting, more habit than intent, but he took it in his left hand in a way that hinted at some long-ago order of doing things. Minette was not offended. His smile, the barely upturned corners of his mouth, stayed fixed, as did his eyes on hers. Those eyes glistened with evening light, and his face bore a radiance of sincere gladness. It took Minette by surprise, very pleasant surprise. "So you're Mr. Theo?"
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.